it was really a tale of two digital transformations. One was the laggard companies, to call it that, who really had to try and figure out how to operate in a digital world for the, perhaps much faster than they had planned to do it. Maybe they thought they could take the next 3 or 4 years to do it. Had to try and get everything done in 12 months. And of course, there's a lot of vendors and services firms more than happy to help them do that.
Right.
And then the advanced firms, of course, they're in the position to take advantage of their, a lot of their digital maturity. That they got a lot of the pieces in place to just help deliver value to customers through their digital platforms. I think one of the things we saw is that there's a lot more direct to consumer from the traditional businesses that weren't direct to consumer.
Right.
So B2B companies opening up direct to consumer channels, saw a lot more of that. Companies looking to change their business model, to more platform models, selling more through marketplaces. We saw that accelerate a lot in 2020. So marketplaces is just growing very fast. Does it mean that it's harder for the challenger startups? I don't think so. No, we're going to continue to see startups accelerate and put pressure on the incumbent companies, because it's easier to just create a business and go test an idea. As easy as it has ever been. And unless it's a heavily regulated industry, there's very little to stop a company trying to go out and do that. What I have seen is a shift in some cases in the way the larger firms are thinking about the interaction with the startup economy, right? So
right.
How they're actually looking at venture capital, how they're looking at incubation of ideas of either their own or other companies. So all of those things, I'm seeing a lot of shift in that space too. Well, a cultural transformation is one of the things I looked at, and we did a piece of wave research, we call them, earlier this year, looking at the top 10 vendors that are doing business model transformation with their clients. And culture was part of one of the things that we looked at in terms of how well they're helping clients change that culture. And I have to say, it's one of the things that I think is least accounted for in a transformation. That a lot of firms, they'll focus on the technology, they'll focus on the customer, they'll focus on a lot of other things, even employee metrics, but sometimes they just totally overlook the culture. And that's partly because I think it's very hard to change. If I think about the things that they do well, one is having a real frank, open assessment, from being willing to listen to employees, to let the employees tell you what the culture is actually like, because it's never what the leaders think it is, right? There's this huge difference between what the leaders think the culture is and what everybody else says it is. And they say culture is kind of what your employees do when nobody's looking, right? So it's like, you really got to get it from the employees. I'm constantly stunned by how many senior executives I talk to don't know what their managers' OKRs are, right? So they don't know how their managers actually measure. Like, how can you help your manager be successful if you don't know how they're measured, right? And it's so this awareness of what metrics are through the organization, how they stack together. Yes, it starts at the top, and it requires, I think, the leadership to have some awareness of how they cascade down through the organization and what the impact is of those metrics. I have seen, let's put it this way: when we started tracking chief digital officers in 2013, about 50% of them back then said they thought this role was temporary. That percentage has gone down. There's been a shift, like earlier on, like towards 2015, 16. I was seeing a lot more CDOs sort of more aligned with marketing. And then I started to see a shift where there's more CDOs aligned with technology. And so I think a lot of CIOs who were being hired were coming in and saying, well, I don't mind coming in as the CIO, but I want the title of Chief Digital Officer because it sounds cooler and nobody wants to be a CIO. And I think there's certainly been that. And I see a lot of CDOs who are responsible for IT and, digital. So that kind of makes sense to me, because it's a natural extension if you've got a business focused CDO who understands technology. The chief technology officer, though, is an interesting one, because that's always been around. That's been sometimes just you could flip between a CIO and a CTO. They both do the same job. The key industry that was different is technology industry. In the technology industry, you have a chief technology officer, and they're responsible for the product. And so I think as companies build more digital products and they drive revenue out of those digital products, in other words, they become more of a digital business, which is the transformation. then yes, the CTO is likely to be that. I'd also say you could call that and chief digital product officer for that matter.
Yeah.
It's really a question of what is it going to elevate the role of whoever's senior responsible for the technology, the digital products, into a role that helps them have that seniority in the organization. Because I think the CEO needs to have a senior executive who understands how to build digital products and drive revenue from them, because that's the future of the business. So I'll often pick up like Harvard or Forbes or whatever it is and just scan through it and like, yeah, okay, we wrote about this 2 years ago. So it's that bit's a little bit challenging. Reading other research, I like reading other analysis. A lot of really bright people at Forrester, so that's always great because I do actually read a lot of the stuff we publish. So it's great when you're sitting inside essentially an information business where we're churning out like leading edge research about what companies are doing, because you just have to like go talk to your neighbor or pick up a paper and go figure out, well, that's what's going on there. Looking at data, we drive a lot of stuff out of data, right? So we're doing massive data surveys every year, and that's really insightful just to see the trends and connect the dots about what's going on. But then Wall Street Journal, I try and keep up to date with what's going on in the newspapers. BBC News I track. BBC Technology's got a great channel as well.
They do.
And so, and social media, I try and, see what people are posting on social media, when I'm not actually sleeping.